film this, and just as they did the one in this morning. And so if you have a question, if you give me a minute, I'd love to give you the microphone. If we're moving at a faster pace, I'll just repeat your question so that they can use the closed caption at home. With that, we'll go ahead and start. It's a little after 5 o'clock. Hello. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out. We're going to be discussing the preservation, the landscape preservation ordinance and the changes that are taking place. I'd like to welcome you here to Royal Palm Village Hall. Most of you have been here at Village Hall. Tonight, we like to say this is where the rubber tree meets the road. Kind of a little bit of a pun. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Robert Hill. I'm the Community Development Director. I supervise the code enforcement, the building division, and the business and tax regulation. In the back there, you'll see Linda Walker. She's our code enforcement supervisor. She's also one of our key resources to answering questions that are going to be rising up, as are her officers that are in the field. And you've most likely seen them because we do a good job of canvassing our area on a daily basis. But as we build our education with that, with the landscaping, we are going to be your resource for any kind of questions that you may have as it comes to that point. I'd like to mention one thing here, and that is our mission statement here at the Village of Royal Palm Beach. It's to provide services and facilities to create an aesthetically pleasing, active, and connected community. So we take that very seriously here, and all of our goals and our strategies are apply towards those immediate solutions. We feel like this preservation code, the landscape code, directly affects your quality of life and also, importantly, your ability to protect your property values and continue to make the Village of Royal Palm Beach the place that it is that we all want to be, reside, and live. I'd like to take a quick moment here and just take a survey of our group. Are there any HOA members here? Condo Association? Very good. Are there any property management team members here? Property manager? Chris, John, good to see you. Any pool contractors? Pool contractors, I'm glad you're here because if you haven't been involved already, this does affect pools and other building contractors. Okay, landscapers, landscaping contractors, landscaping firms. Hello, welcome. All right, well, we're going to get going here. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint to begin with. It won't take me very long, and I'm going to explain the reasons why and how we are going to implement this code. And then my associate here, George Messimer, with Cutler and Herring, is going to go into some of the specifics about the review process and also the proper pruning techniques to help you preserve the structure of your landscaping throughout the village. And at the end, there'll be plenty of time for a question session. That way, some of you that may have to leave, you can do that. But feel free to stop me as we go through, and I'll try to answer any kind of questions during the PowerPoint presentation. All right, again, we're going to try to get you the microphone so that the people at home can see exactly what our questions are that we're generating. All right, we'll get going. Thank you. So the landscaping code hadn't been revised since 2001. And that's about the time where a lot of the new developments back in November 15 of 2001 had a minimum landscaping code applied to them as they were built. But the village is almost built out, and there's a shift now in developing areas to protect and preserve the landscaping that we have. So that's why we're coming forward with this. The trend in some of the older neighborhoods that we see is that as they remove trees, the landscaping is not being replaced. And the result of losses through hurricanes, most recently 2004 and 5, I personally know we hauled out more than 100,000 cubic feet of debris during those storms. And just recently with Irma, the same kind of effect happened. I'd like to point out that the village is a Tree City USA, and we've had that designation for 29 years. So some of the responsibility of being a tree city, which we certainly boast as an advocate for trees and greenery, and brings people to our neighborhoods and also protects our property values, is maintaining that. Having a preservation code is a requirement of some of those issues to maintain that certification. I think we all realize that trees are a good thing. Some of the obvious kind of niceties that come along with them, but I'd like to run through some of these just in case you don't know that a large tree, a big tree, a canopy type of tree, removes 60 to 70 times more pollution than a small tree. The trees actually are known to help people with stress. If you're around a treed environment, it's been proven that you have changes in blood pressure and muscle tension. Trees reduce noise and pollution by absorbing the sounds. Trees have also been known to improve driving safety. As I point out here, one study shows that 46% decrease in crash rates along the arterial and highway sites after landscaping has been installed. So there are some real benefits. Reducing the cruising speed of cars. You know, one of the topics that is quite popular here is traffic calming, as we try to protect our families and our loved ones and our property. Well, trees have been known to reduce the cruising speeds up to 3 miles per hour, so it's a very good way. Tree shade improves, reduces pavement fatigue, and also saves on maintenance costs through parking lots. And some of you that are involved with property management will certainly recognize that. I'd like to point out a few other benefits, business benefits of trees and canopies. Some statistics that don't quite get seen very often. Shoppers will travel further and longer to visit a district with high quality trees and spend more time when they arrive. They have favorable perceptions of communities with green roads. Visitors with well-treed areas will tend to spend 9 to 12% more for products. Pricing is changed with that. 7% have held on to higher rental rates for commercial offices having high quality landscapes. And some studies have even seen increases up to 37% in residential property values that are associated with the presence of trees and vegetation on the property. Here we've got two examples, two very good looking homes, very structurally sound homes, and they're even slightly green homes, but one is a little bit different. When you look at the one on the left, it's a good looking home, but it's lacking some kind of warmth with the landscaping. The one on the right shows with the palm trees more of a greenery, there's more shade, and that's more of the look that we're trying to accomplish and maintain within our maintenance code. Here's an example on a commercial property. Okay, the one on the top there, you'll see, if you can see, it's a little bit dark, but those trees have been severely cut back to the point of their hat racked, and they're going to have a difficult time, even with a professional arborist, trying to maintain them to bring them back to the structural integrity that they had when they were fuller. Down below, you'll see a property that is maintained, and it's a lot greener, and we think that one has a competitive advantage by having that landscaping with it. Problems with our old approach, our existing approach. It was not a preservation approach, didn't provide guidance on tree preservation techniques. It focused more on just the tree counts and not so much the tree canopy. What we're trying to come up with is a plan here to establish canopy equity, meaning that if it's a large tree that goes down, we want to see a large tree go back. And if we can't get a large tree to go back, then we want to increase the number of trees to try to make that equitable loss in that canopy. The old code didn't require a property owner to replace the canopy that we removed. It was still on a 1-to-1 type of ratio. And it didn't treat specimen trees differently than newly planted trees. And the result is a significant loss of canopy over time. Some of those concepts that we'll talk about we'll address as we go a little further down specimen trees and other issues. These are the topics that I'll quickly be going through. Topic number 1, this is tree trimming and pruning standard. My associate George will go into that a little bit further. And he's got some very good examples of the proper techniques that we'd like to show and share with everybody. Vegetation removal permits. So that now with this vegetation removal permit process, it defines when a dead, deteriorated, or diseased tree that can be removed. And it also still allows you to abate a problem with a health and safety issue without a vegetation removal permit. So if we're very reasonable here, if there's a tree that is immediately pending a threat to your home, a broken limb on your home, take pictures of it. You will have to prove to us, eventually that there was that kind of situation to abate those kind of concerns. But you can move quickly and take care of those and protect your persons and property with that. And it also allows for prohibited vegetation, Australian pines, and we have a list of those, other ones that can be removed without a vegetation removal permit. Anybody have any questions or anything so far? The cost is no cost for a residential application, and it's a $75 fee for a commercial application. Yes.
Quickly, an arborist, if you have trees, this association I was affiliated with, Strathmore West, had 3 preserves within the association, and I was on that landscaping committee. We always had an arborist come in and trim the trees before the hurricanes. This new development I'm in, people are just saying, just cut them. I'm saying, no, you can't just cut a tree. You know, they just don't have any concept of what's going on, and they just think you just cut limbs. And I was trying to explain you have to have a professional arborist, and is that correct?
Well, so your question is, do you have to have a professional arborist come and cut your trees?
Yes.
Well, the answer is it's certainly beneficial to have that because you're going to be held to that standard. If you have somebody that may not have the certification and is able to cut them appropriately, then that will work, okay? But to be assured of that, we're suggesting that everybody contact an arborist, have somebody on board, somebody using their techniques, come and use the resources that we have. We've got books available, right here, and the books are available in the library and everything else about proper pruning techniques that will strengthen your tree and help you complete your maintenance without reducing that. What you've just explained to me is a very common scenario, and that people don't understand the small issues that it really takes to maintain the structure of a tree. It may just seem like cutting it and then they grow, and you know what? In Florida, it does grow back. And then with the old code, that's how we used to handle it. People would come and they would hat rack a tree, but if we gave them time, it would certainly grow back and be green. But it wasn't as strong. And what I've learned, through my education in regards to this, is that it never grows back the way it should. Those sprouting green roots are never the same as the center, leader of a tree. And it's just a matter of time that when you weaken that structure, sooner or later it's going to compromise that tree. And that failure may then bring on the ultimate disease that kills it, or it may ultimately bring on that failure that creates more property damage for you. So your answer is, I don't even want to talk about the exception. The answer is yes. Find a professional that's comfortable with the proper techniques. Just reinforcing what I said. Yes, yes. So on December 20th of this year, we passed the code. And what the code says is that any building additions, driveways, pools, roof structures, sheds that increases the pervious area, or any residential application or non-residential that increases it more than 10%, is required to get a vegetation removal permit. So with that, it's required to have a pervious area calculation form, which we have, that helps you calculate the size of your driveways, your sidewalks, your structure, sheds and things like that we minus out of the gross area to know what your expectation is for the minimum code. And we'll talk further about that. We made some changes with that calculation to make it a little less onerous on the residents and something that's more realistically compatible to existing homes, and especially some of the homes that are on the southern end that were built prior to any of these guidelines. Projects that are over 250 square feet will also require a vegetation survey and the survey index, so that property will be reviewed for minimum landscape requirements. The gentleman that's a pool contractor, have you had an application come in recently to the office? Okay. So that's something very new. And it's hard for sometimes building contractors or pool contractors to see the nexus between that. I'm just building a pool. I'm not here for the landscaping and what have you. So the process for that is you come in with the application of the pool, you calculate, just as you would any new construction, the pervious area calculation. We're going to create a ratio between the impervious area and the pervious area on your lot. And that's already well defined in the planning code. RS1 properties are 50% minimum. RS2 is 50% minimum. And some of the RS3, which is the 0 lot lines in the patio homes, go down to 20% minimums. If you think about that, you'll see smaller lots and with homes in there, and their requirements are a little bit different. So with that, that's how we're able to tell you, firstly, if you're going to be able to add that new driveway, and if you are going to add or expand that driveway, your requirement is going to be to have so many trees on your property. When we talk about a tree survey, we're not talking about a professional landscaper going out and doing anything. We're talking about writing on an existing survey is very convenient, or even a handwritten sketch of your property. And what we're asking you to do is identify your trees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1, you'll see here on the next slide. If you can see there on the right, that's the index. Tree number 1, it may say oak tree. I think it's 15 feet tall, and its diameter at breast height, which is right here at 54 inches, is 6 inches or 3 inches. All right? You would count those trees up, inclusive of the palm trees, and submit that with that pool application, or that patio application, or that shed application. All right? That way, we forward that over to our consultant. He looks at that and as it's involved with the zoning code, and tells you what your requirement is. And it's in here a little bit further, but it's based on the net area of the calculation. And I'll talk to that just a second. Let me speak to this, the replacement schedule. The thinking and the theory is, like I said earlier, we're trying to establish the canopy equity. We're trying to maintain that same amount of shade. So a larger tree is basically an older tree, and older trees are going to have more canopy. So with that replacement schedule, when you identify a tree, here's another example. I'm going to expand my driveway, but I want to take out this big oak tree right to the right. Okay, if the oak tree is from 9 to 16 inches, then the required replacement of that would be 2 trees somewhere on that property. Okay, because we're trying to compensate for the loss of that canopy. In that same example, if you had an opportunity and you had a property there and you said, listen, I don't have room for 3 trees. I've got this big tree, I wanted to get rid of it. We're going to encourage you to put one back in the place that it was. Okay? So even if you have room for just 1 tree, you would then have the opportunity to explain in your application, I don't have room for these other trees, what can I do? George would be reviewing that application. He would look at that and say, well, your other option is going to be able to donate a tree or make a donation to a tree bank. We have a tree bank set up so that people that can't or don't want to, or actually can't, match the canopy on their property are able to donate into a fund, and those monies will be used for reforestation projects throughout the village. So that monies will go towards trees on another streetscape or something like that for that canopy equity. It may not happen on your property, but it'll happen at another part across town. This kind of speaks towards the reforestation plans that I just mentioned. We're still developing those, the guidelines for those plans, but they are in the works. There's some exceptions to that tree replacement. Excuse me. In the event that a named storm, a hurricane comes and damages that tree, that specimen tree, right? Blows it over. You say, look, this tree's damaged, it's going to die. My arbor said it's going to die. We agree it's going to die. In that event, or in the event that it just finally reaches its full life and passes on and dies, then you would able to, or if it's involved in a wreck, a car wreck, such as your neighbor crashes into it, you would only have to replace that on a 1-to-1 ratio. That is beyond your control. We recognize that. This is not a move initiated by any kind of construction or anything, but we do want to still involve ourselves with that canopy, so that would be taken care of that way. Any questions so far? Specimen trees, as I mentioned. These are trees that are mature trees that have grown to a specific size. This is some examples of our specimen tree table. A bald cypress, 10 inches in diameter at breast height. Gumbo limbo, 10 inches. Live oak, 10 inches. And the form, just so that you all know, as I've had to learn, there's different measurements for trees. If you go to the nursery and buy a tree at diameter, they're going to try to sell you one that the diameter is at the pot, where it comes out of the pot. DBH is right here at 54 inches. The way you measure that is you take your tape measure or your cloth tape or whatever. You measure the circumference of the tree, right? And then you divide that by pi, 3.14. And that answer will give you the diameter of the tree, which is actually the thickness. If you were to look at the tree and put your hands like that, the distance between your hands is what we're trying to calculate. So specimen trees are, just as the replacement tree schedule mentioned, they are replaced at different ratios. So if somebody wants to build a pool and they want to get rid of this mature specimen oak tree in the back, they may have to replace their trees 3-to-1. So somewhere on their property, they'd have to have a location for 3 trees. A canopy tree equals a canopy tree. They're 14 feet tall, 2.5 inches at breast height, and they create shade of at least 5 feet. That equals 1 tree. 3 palm trees, regardless of what kind or size, as long as they're 14 feet tall, those equal 1 canopy or shade tree. So if you see that example right over here on the right, you see that it looks like an adenidia palm, that triple, we would consider that 3 trees, that equals 1 shade tree. So if you're in a development and you have a tree that needs to be replaced, if it's on one-on-one ratio, and the reason you're getting rid of it is because of the roots, that may be a good option for you to go with the 3 palms equal 1 shade tree, and then have the reduced root problems.
So not necessarily has to be, if it's like an oak tree, you can replace with a palm tree.
If the oak tree equals, if it's smaller than 10 inches, okay, and it's going to be replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio, and the question is, can an oak tree be replaced with palm trees? Yes, it can. But you have to have 3 palm trees equal that 1 oak tree. The remedies of the violations are clear. There can be a rehabilitation plan given so that this tree has to be monitored and cut correctly within a couple of years. It can also be told to be removed or replaced, meaning if the arborist says that tree is cut so badly that it will not heal up and be manageable, or it'll be unsafe, then it may have to be replaced. Or, and what this new code does bring on board, is you're able to get an arborist of your own and come back and say, look, I cut this tree, maybe I cut it wrong, maybe the other person cut it wrong. I've got an arborist now that says he can save it. If I trim these and fertilize and water appropriately, okay, we're going to take those responses in as a way to try to make it through some of these problems that have arisen. That request will then also go to George, who is our consultant arborist, and make sure that it's valid. So we wouldn't want somebody just to hack something down and be able to say, oh, this isn't going to be a problem, leave us alone. This is a sincere effort to try to maintain the canopy. Any questions with that at all? So back to the calculation, as I promised we would get to. The landscaping now and the new developments up until now, the landscaping requirements when it comes to single-family homes were based on gross area. Your lot, say it was 8,000 square feet, every 2,000 of that required 1 tree and 10 shrubs. So if it was 8,000, then you'd have 4 trees and 40 shrubs, right? There's 4 2,000s in that 8. Realizing that is not going to be a doable solution here, what we've added is a net area calculation. So now you're going to be able to come in, as I mentioned, the impervious-pervious area calculation, and you're going to take your gross area, and you're going to be able to minus out your home, your shed, your sidewalk, your driveway, and you're going to come up with how much pervious area, how much grassed area that you still have available. Your minimum code requirement will be based on that net value. 1 tree, 10 shrubs per 2,000 square feet, or any portion thereof. 2,000, yes?
Doesn't that compromise the city of trees that you're speaking about? Because people put more concrete down and there's less grass and shrubs to put in.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the construction and the amount of impervious area is already regulated. Each zoning district has a minimum standard, and most of them are 50%. So by the time you do your pool and your house and everything, it's reasonable to think that 50% of that area remains grass or pervious and allows the water to percolate into the ground and be filtered naturally. So that's in place. Now, what we're also doing is now we're going to take that net area calculation and we're applying that to the responsibility of the landscaping code. So if you'll see here, it's actually a reduction of what the calculation used to be. On the bottom here, you'd see, well, here on the top, RS2 zoning district, 8,000 square feet, 4 trees. RS3, 7,000, 4 trees, okay? Remember, any portion thereof. So that last 1,000 beyond 6 is towards that 2,000, so we require that 4th tree. Now, down below here, you'll see an example of how we take out and we reduce it down to the net pervious area. The number of trees required in the current code would have been 4, now it's 3, okay? The number was 5, now it's 4, okay? Realizing that to make it workable, these older homes that haven't had any kind of standard applied to them, it's going to be very difficult for someone to go in there and say, listen, you need 4 trees, by this standard. So we thought that was a more fair and equitable way that we proposed in front of the council, and they've steered us towards that because we want to make this a community effort. This is really an effort to maintain property values, maintain the aesthetics, the quality of life throughout our village. And we're getting everybody's buy-in, one at a time, people that are out there with their existing homes, and as well as the ones that come in to increase their value or add an addition, then it's applied to them. This again kind of reiterates the pervious area calculation. This housekeeping revisions talk about the November 15th, 2001 line in the sand when they're newer than that. Well, previous to that, there was no standard involved with the construction of new homes. Right? Since that date, there has been a standard that's been in place. Just to let you know, commercial properties are developed with a site plan that comes in and is reviewed by that. Not necessarily based on pervious area, but it's the number of tree counts and given how much buffering they have to require. They are required to have. Again, this just kind of addresses the right-of-way utilization permits. You still have to, if you're going to plant a tree in the swale of the right-of-way, you do have to go through the engineering department to get that approval. It's very specific with the kind of trees that you can plant on there, in there. All right, and with this, it talks about the date that it was passed, December 20th. They gave us 6 months to try to reach out and educate people, the contractors, the residents. So as of June 20, that's when we'll formally be enforcing the planting and the pruning techniques. All right. Right now, we realize there's a learning curve that's involved with that. Hopefully, some of you have seen articles that I've put in the newsletters. You've seen notifications on some of the marquee signs encouraging everybody to come out, and as well as the letters that we sent out to try to invite everybody to hear, so that we could explain it all to you. After that grace period, then we'll apply the ANSI A300 standard. I have a copy in my office. And George is going to get ready to go over some of the more details involved with those trimming techniques. But before I turn it over to George, is there any questions about anything that I've gone over so far?
So you count the back of the house and the front?
We count the entire lot, okay. Right? That's the gross area. Okay. And then we minus out any of the impervious areas, sheds, driveways, the home itself, pool decking. Just so you know, the pool water itself is considered pervious. That water does end up into the ground system. It's just the decking that's impervious. And that's calculated to come up with a net number. That net number is then applied to, it's divided by 2,000. So for every 2,000 allotment, there's 1 tree and 10 shrubs or portion thereof that needs to be added. So yes, front yard, backyard. Anybody else? Excuse me.
Yeah, I got a question. Is it a situation where you're losing trees in the city of Royal Palm Beach that this policy because they're losing a lot of trees in the city? I mean, as far as trees to one oak or whatever the case is.
So your question is
losing a lot of trees in the city?
Is the
All this is a new policy you're implementing.
Yes, we have a landscape code. We're revising this with our preservation code. And your question is it coming about because of loss of canopy within the village? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The answer is, as I mentioned, throughout hurricane seasons, we've lost a lot of canopy that never seems to get replaced for a lot of different reasons. We experienced right before Hurricane Irma, some residents went out and cut down trees right in front of their property. Good, healthy trees that most of them we didn't think even posed a problem to the house. They dropped them down. Those trees never came back. They don't want to replace them back. Also, just through attrition, we've seen that. And if you look at some of the different areas, and like I said, homes that were built prior to 2001, you'll see a significant less amount of landscaping in those areas. So recognizing that, the answer is yes. We're coming up with these revisions to try to protect and preserve the canopy that we have. In areas that we can actually, it doesn't work within a specific property, we're going to develop a tree bank type of system to then be able to formally address, whether it's in a park or a specific neighborhood, the opportunity for somebody to have donated a tree so that every house along a street should at least have one tree out front with some shrubs along the houses. Does that answer your question? Thank you very much. That's a good question. Yes, sir.
I trim my trees probably
They're trying to do closed captioning.
what's that?
They're doing closed captioning. They've asked me to give them mic.
Okay.
Instead of repeating your question.
Okay, thank you. As you know, I have several shopping centers and residential developments in Royal Palm Beach over the last 40 years. And I'm making a point to trim my trees before the hurricane season because it's costing a lot of money if and when there's a hurricane or strong winds, when the branches come down. So it actually costs the village a lot of money because a lot of it ends up in your streets and a lot of it ends up in our properties. So it costs you a lot of money to clean up in a long time. And everybody knows how difficult it is to even hire people to get all the branches all over the streets and properties. But I try to minimize it by trimming just before the hurricane season. What is the village doing to balance the excessive costs of whenever there's high winds and hurricanes versus the high cost of cleanup and the need for shade trees? Yeah. So the balancing act to save costs to the village, taxpayer money, as well as property owners clean up afterwards. How do you balance this effort?
Well, that's a very intricate question. As you know, when there is a storm, the cleanup process is borne by taxpayers. Okay, it may come from FEMA, it may come from the federal government or be reimbursed, but they're still taxpayers. We're all taxpayers. So the balance between the goals between establishing a canopy and then having to pay for it in the long run. Well, I don't have a direct answer for that. I can explain to you some of the benefits that we mentioned previous that allow for higher rents and successful property values to be maintained throughout the village. I think is seen as that trade-off between those impacts that potentially an increased canopy could have. I would offer that property values that are maintained or increase, I think it wouldn't be very hard to be able to identify a portion of that might be due to having a green landscaping around our city. I think we recognize that, and I know you've been involved with beautification projects in the past. So my answer to you, Mr. Santa Maria, would be that is our trade-off. By having the increased values that increase people's property and the values that go in within the city would be that trade-off between any kind of potential downside of an increased canopy of having to clean up in the event of a storm. Does that answer your question? I wouldn't be able to say clearly that.
I feel too much emphasis on the shade trees, the canopy, is costly. I try to beautify my shopping centers by replacing what I consider ugly cabbage palms, sable palms, with royal palm trees and Sylvester palm trees, which cost 6-7 times more money. I don't mind spending the money, but it beautifies my centers.
Mhm.
But I feel sometimes there might be too much emphasis of the canopies and the shade trees, which is costly to both the taxpayer, the village, and the property owners.
Mhm. Well, I will take that into consideration. I do see that there is an equity difference between even the replacement ratio of 3 palms to a shade tree. So it sounds like what you're saying is focusing on the shade palms where they're less maintenance, still provide beautification, and less focus on the canopy is what your suggestion might possibly be. Is that right? I don't want to summarize for you, but
I'm trying to find the happy balance.
okay, that sounds good. Anybody? Yes, sir.
You want me to take the mic? If you could. Sure.
So one thing I've observed here in the village, and this is something that I think has been adopted from maybe possibly from other municipalities because this is common to me. But the cost of putting 3 palm trees in for one shade tree is usually about 3 times the cost to put in 3 palm trees. So in the short term, you're better off with a shade tree. With the possibility 10, 12 years having a hurricane and damaging a tree that's maybe not properly pruned and taken care of, causing damage or blowing over, that's just a big variable. If somebody's taking care of the tree properly and it's the right tree in the right place, then you're very unlikely to have that kind of storm damage where the tree's going to blow over and destroy something. However, putting in royal palms, for instance, in a shopping center, there's a lot of cars and people and traffic. They get very tall, very big, and they cast off their fronds and their boots, and it causes a lot of damage, and there's a lot of liability in that as well. But the Sylvester palms and the other day palms are beautiful. They're very expensive, and they also require a lot more care to keep them looking good. Plus, all of them are loaded with thorns. And that's a big issue, trying to work around those for the people working on them, as well as moving that debris and chipping that debris and getting it off the site. So, I think either way, you're going to pay, but I think the better. This is just my opinion. I'm an arborist for 25 years. I've been 30 years in business. Jason's Arbor Care, and I have found that you will pay less if you take care of a tree when it's younger and you give it attention and not just neglect it and let it grow. However, if you develop, and like the gentleman will probably teach us here shortly, if you develop a central leader in the tree and a good root system, and you look for root defects before you plant them and so on. If the trees are maintained properly, and not to take work from anybody, it's hard to find an arborist to work on your tree. It really is. There's only so many certified arborists. Most of them are business owners or managers. They're not the ones out there actually doing the work. But if the arborist is involved and he trains his staff, I have people that are not arborists that have worked with me 25 years, but they're just as good. But as long as they're being supervised and you're taking care of trees when they're young, you're much less likely to have these problems down the road, if that's helpful.
thank you.
Well, I came here not knowing anything about trees except putting them in the ground. I've been here since 1983. And I've planted several trees on my property. I know nothing too much about, pruning them and all of that kind of stuff. So that seems to be a problem for me because I live alone. and I'm a senior citizen. That's very, very expensive for me because I have nobody to come there and do this, do that. I'm on a fixed income. And it's just kind of frightening to me to have that kind of responsibility of something I know nothing about.
I understand your concerns entirely. I can just let you know that if your trees aren't trimmed, then there's no problem with the village or anything else like that. Okay, we would encourage you to seek out a professional to help you to maintain those trees that you love. But
they've been trimmed from time to time because I lose limbs during the hurricanes and stuff like that. And maybe my grandson or somebody.
sure.
But it's just, to me, I know not to you guys, but to me, it's the
Oh, we're in this together. I have trees on my property as well. We're going to show you some pictures. Don't be nervous. We're going to show you some pictures, and when you see some of these techniques that are wrong, you're going to be able to leave here with at least a little bit of an education that says, don't cut my tree like that, because I know I'll get in trouble. You know, take your time and do little pieces of it, you know, and really care for the tree with a sincere effort, and I don't think you'll have a problem. And also, if you get the right person, and there are ways, and like we had mentioned earlier, there are ways to take care of that and make your home safe, that when you get somebody to trim it, if they do have to do a reduction cut at that point, they just have to make the good decision as to where to make that cut. No one's going to expect you to live in harm's way for the sake of a tree canopy. Yes.
Is there something you can do? There's quite a few senior citizens in this community, in Royal Palm. And is there something, maybe a grant or something to assist some seniors that might have their own?
We haven't been made aware of anything like that. We'll seek out whatever help we can get for our residents.
For a lot of people.
Sure. All right. Anybody else? I'm going to hand this over to George. He's got a lot of information that you'll find very informative. And George Messimer, here you go.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is George Messimer. I work with Kotler and Hearing, and we are the landscape consultants for the Village of Royal Palm Beach. Primarily, we are a landscape architecture company. We also have environmental consultants, arborist consultants, and land planning consultants. And our primary goal with the village is to help citizens, property owners, with their own properties, maintaining the landscape and addressing problems and educating before any code compliance issues come about. So with that, I'll go over a few of the services that we're providing the village. Firstly, vegetation removal permit review. So when a permit gets submitted to the village for vegetation removal, they'll send it to us and we'll review the contents of that permit, what's being requested, and then the requirements if they're being met along with that permit. We're also performing landscape inspections, landscape code compliance inspections for commercial properties, and then landscape development plan review for new proposed projects, commercial and residential developments. So going into the code compliance inspections, right now we're going through, it's kind of a two-pronged approach, going to existing commercial developments, examining the approved landscape plan, and then looking at what's on site, whether something's been damaged, removed, if it died or was removed and not replaced, shrubs missing or run over that need to be replaced, the mulch requirements, just general stuff like that. And then we'll issue a letter to the property owner or the property management company saying what we found that was wrong or not code compliant. And they have a certain time frame. We'll work with them on a schedule on how to replace it. And again, the intent is not to be punitive. The whole goal of this ordinance is to work with the residents of the village to address any maintenance concerns or code compliance issues so that the village can keep that tree city designation that is so very important. And then I'll go into the vegetation removal requirements, the things that we look for. So Again, when you submit a permit, you can find the application online and you're submitting everything to the village, and then they'll forward us the information. Completed application, again, you can find that online. A $75 application fee, and that application fee is waived for single family and duplex dwellings. So it's really for commercial and multifamily projects. Submitting an aerial photograph or survey with the existing vegetation labeled, and then a legend along with it to say what that landscaping is. So, for example, if it's a residential property and you have a lot survey that has the outline of your house and the outline of your property, and then you can hand draw on there where those trees are, where the shrubs are, just with a number or a letter, and then a legend to the side saying what it is and how big it is. The most important number being the DBH, because that's how we calculate if there needs to be a replacement tree for it. And then, again, the whole calculation of the net lot area is very important too, because at that time we would verify the minimum landscaping standards for that property. And if it's deficient, we would make you aware and let you know what you need to do. For existing commercial and multifamily properties, a copy of approved landscape plan to verify if the tree being removed was required on that landscaping plan. So for any tree that is required, it is needed to be replaced, whether it's a specimen tree or not. Identify all vegetation to be removed. Essential part of the application, but you'd be surprised how many people miss it. Just identifying it on the plan, saying this one we're removing, picture along with it to say, if there's a problem with it, if it's the location, if it's damaging roots, if there's anything in that we can suggest to save the tree. If you're worried that it's a health risk or something and we see opportunity for that tree to survive, we could advise certain measures. Go to a professional and figure out what you can do to save the tree rather than just removing it. And then identifying the quantity, species, location, and size of the replacement trees if they're required. And again, for any permit, any species that's prohibited within the village, invasive exotics, you don't need a vegetation removal permit. We want you to go ahead and be able to take that out. And as Rob was saying, for any immediate life safety risk, say a tree's dead on your property, feel like it's gonna fall over into your house, your yard, neighbor's yard, or something like that, we want you to be able to go out, take pictures, get it down immediately to abate any safety risk, and then we can deal with it after the fact, as long as you have pictures to say, we were worried about it, whatever that's worth. So just, you don't have to wait for a permit to get approved if there's an immediate life safety risk. All right, some of the reasons that we see for vegetation removal: tree death, decay, disease, damaging root systems, improper location, and general safety hazards for trees. We recognize all of these, we see them a lot, and some of the examples here, this bottom left picture is actually a property in the village. It's a large black olive that was planted in between two driveways. It was a designated street tree for this project, but over the years it's grown much too large. The root systems are pulling up the driveway. They've had to repave many of the driveways. And they've actually brought in landscape contractors and pruned a lot of the roots right at the base of the driveway, so that in the event of a storm, there's nothing on that half to keep it upright, and it's just gonna fall over. So it's just even a further risk. So they're looking to remove those trees, and since it is required by the landscape plan, it needs to be replaced some way. It's recommended, since it's not a specimen tree, it'd be a one-to-one replacement, and we would recommend it being planted back in that same location because it is a street tree. But it doesn't have to be the same species. So there's some wiggle room in the code to allow for variations in location and the species being put back to where we're not just going to cause the same problem 10 years down the road.
What kind of tree would you recommend for a house?
In a situation like this, there's a variety of different small canopy trees, crepe myrtles. They look dead for half the year, but they're still a nice tree, and they wouldn't have a damaging root system like that in that location. But again, it's really any species that's allowed within the village. And for a situation like that, if you wanted to remove that and put back palm trees, 3 palm trees would equal the shade tree. So if they're throughout the development, they said, all right, we're going to take down our black olives and we want to put back, palm trees. As long as there's 3 for every one that they take out, that's no problem there. Yes.
Those palm trees considered native trees?
Yes. A lot of them. But shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them. Do you have a question?
A tree like that, the one to the left.
Mm-hmm.
My tree is about that size in circumference. It's a black oak. Would that have to be moved?
Is it is it causing any damage to your property, or is it any immediate safety risk?
No, no damage to the sidewalls or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
driveway,
The-
but it does create a lot of leaks.
Any of this information or the code revisions isn't intended to ask you to remove your trees or move them to any location. These are strictly educational material on the process. So say your black olive was right next to your driveway and the roots were lifting it up and cracking it and you wanted to remove it. You could absolutely remove it. And since you're a single family house and a black olive isn't considered a specimen tree regardless of the size, then in the code that we have, it's not listed on there. I believe it's in the packet that you have. You wouldn't have to replace that tree unless it meets your part of your minimum lot requirement. So, yeah. So if you wanted to get rid of it, you could. And these are just examples of some things that we've seen where property owners wanted to remove them. So you're not required to remove your tree if you don't want to.
But if you had, what happens to make you have to remove the tree and go, it's not giving you a problem? Do you put 3 palm trees in its place?
Well, in this example, that tree is giving the property owner a problem. It's lifting up their driveway and cracking it, and they've had to go in and repave their driveways in this community, and it's cost them a lot of extra money. Whereas if they had planted a smaller tree in that location, even 20 years down the road, it wouldn't cause this damage.
Would root barrier prevent any from the solar process? But would it prevent damage to the structure, the pavement?
It's an excellent question. That's something I was going to touch on. We do recommend root barriers. It's not a fix. It's, like you said, it slows the process, but you put a root barrier 5 foot away from an oak tree in over 10 years, those roots are going to find a way around it, and eventually it'll cause you a problem. Now, there's selective root pruning that you can do along the way to prevent that, to draw that process out to where you're not going to have these big surface roots come in and damage your property. But we do recommend root barriers, but it's not a fix-all.
But in the past, right? In the past, root barrier was not a part of the permit when you put in trees, right?
I would imagine so.
It was just a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken, that some of the cities made sure
Yeah.
that certain structures must have root barrier. If not, it's not going to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Yeah, there are certain municipalities that require root barriers if a tree is located within a certain distance to either utilities or paved surfaces. Yes, sir.
Question for Rob. So over the past 10 years, Rob, what has been the village experience on damages caused by roots on buildings, on homes, on sidewalks, on driveways? So there's been a lot of damage caused. So what's been your experience? Number one, the magnitude of the problem, and how the village has been, what has the village done to mitigate those sometimes very expensive, number one, sometimes very expensive costs of this root damage, and secondly, sometimes it's hard to determine who's to pay for fixing the problem, the developer or the homeowner. So that there's a lot of problems with respect to these roots.
So your Emilio? So your question is, what steps has the village taken, excuse me, to mitigate some of the inherent problems that have arisen from trees and growing trees in regards to its infrastructure, sidewalks, and things like that. The village's impact. Well, I can tell you that the biggest changes have been, number one, we install root barrier. It's specified in village contracts that you see that are of any kind of proximity to public sidewalks or facilities, as George mentioned. So it is in our code as far as our specifications. And then the other steps that we've taken have been involving the right-of-way utilization permits. In the past, what had gone in quite innocently as many beautification projects, and sometimes even requirements by the building department decades ago, were that you would have to have 3 or 4 trees in the swale. Okay, well, here we are, 20 years later. Those trees in the swale that looked beautiful are now pushing up the sidewalks and everything. So now, with a more definitive mitigation plan with our right-of-way permits, we limit the number of the kind of species that can be planted there to try to protect and arrest those problems, the roots that go into the sidewalks. The palms stay more in a ball. They're more predictable, not only for the sidewalks, but it's also now we've got a sizable investment, as you know, with our inline drainage that runs throughout the village that helps try to get some of the heavy rainwater off. So I would say most of the areas of improvement or mitigation techniques have been in those areas. The development of root barriers and the involved detailed applications and review of our right-of-way utilization and planting permits. Now, there are still hundreds of homes out there that I don't want to say grandfathered in, but they're left alone until it becomes that issue. And what happens is when we get to a point of time, and it's still a cost that's largely borne by the village, that when the Public Works Department goes out there to an area that has a tree that is not the correct species and continues to alter a sidewalk in the swale area, the owner is given time to either remove it, right, or replace it with the right kind of species, or the village has had those removed. So through attrition, we've had to take care of those a little at a time. But there are still several that are out there, several hundred.
You've answered half of the problem.
Okay, what was the other half?
Half of the question. The other half of the question is, sometimes it's not clear who is to pay for the repair of the damage. Sometimes it's the government, sometimes it's the developer, sometimes it's the HOA, and sometimes it's the individual homeowner. So you have really sometimes a decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
Who is really going to pay for the cost of the damage or done? Your answer solves the problem and mitigates the future, but
Well, the past as well.
I'm interested in determining whose responsibility it is when you have a question mark.
Well, I think I'd have to look at each situation a little bit differently. The property lines would certainly come into play. The requirement for the public access would come into play. Generally, in regards to residential property, that I can speak to them a little bit more clearly, is the backside of the sidewalk is the property line generally. So if a tree is on that side and it's damaging it, they'll be put on notice at that point. I know Paul Webster is out there and has done repairs, but then we do let them know. We put in the root barrier when we can, but there to address those problems at that point.
Let me give you one specific example. In my own development estate, we have the trees on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk and the homeowner is required to put a tree, and I think the black olives and some palm trees along the streets and sidewalks. And there's been arguments between the HOA and the homeowner when there's a damage to the sidewalk and the tree is removed. They expect that the homeowner
Well, I know it wouldn't be the village in that regard because those are private roads that aren't adopted by. But the HOA, the argument between the HOA and the resident, I don't know the answer. Do you, Linda?
I think it depends. So in Madison Green, we have I think it's Walton, where a lot of the trees have died, and we notified the POA, and they came back and said, oh no, our docs say it's the homeowners association. Well, through code enforcement, it's Florida state statute says it's the property owner, and that's the POA. So it may be that we have to work with the POA, and then if they have bylaws that are different, then it's something that the property owners association would have to work out with the homeowner.
I'd have to say we don't have a specific answer for that right now. I can see the dilemma. I think the development was required to have those public sidewalks, so I would lean towards the HOA being the responsible entity in that. Now, if they were to pass cost on to the individual owners, I don't know how that would actually work out. Anything else before we proceed? Go ahead, George.
And I can continue another example, this same tree we're talking about with the black olive there. All the landscaping within this particular community falls underneath the responsibility of the HOA. So the HOA is responsible for removing that tree when it's damaging that driveway, but they're not responsible for repaving that driveway because of the damage. So they'll cover the cost of removing it. They cover the cost of all the maintenance of the landscaping within that community, but it would be up to the homeowner because the driveway is their property. So continuing on, replacement trees when they're required. If you are removing a specimen tree or a tree required by a landscape plan on a commercial or multifamily property. Selecting those species must be if you're required replacement trees because it's a specimen tree or required because of a landscape plan. It has to be an approved species within the Village of Royal Palm Beach, and we like to see species that are similar to what's being removed. It's not a strict requirement. It's just calculating that canopy lost versus canopy gained. So if you're removing an oak tree and you're planting back a ligustrum, it's not really equivalent. Minimum requirements within the village, the standard within the code that's been established. In order for it to be a canopy tree, it has to reach a mature height of at least 15 feet. And then when it's planted, it has to be planted at 14 foot tall with a 2.5 inch DBH and a 5 foot spread. These are just minimum requirements within the village code. And then for placement, again, we like to see it go back to where it's being removed from, but it's not a strict requirement. So if you're removing it because of the location, we're not going to say, all right, put a tree right back there so you have the same problem in 10 years. We don't want to see that. We like to solve problems, not make more. All right, so again, tree placement. You should really have consideration towards the location of power lines, sidewalks, driveways, foundations, and underground utilities as well. The use of root barriers can help in these situations. If there's limited amounts of space for those trees, there's certain methods that you can use over the years to mitigate for those. Power lines is another huge one. We see a lot of big perimeter buffer trees located right next to power lines, and then every year they have to come through and trim those so they don't damage the power lines. Not really something that can be helped besides choosing species on the location. So if you're a residential property owner and you have power lines along the front or back of your property, putting a big canopy tree right next to it isn't good for the tree. It's going to cost you more money to maintain that tree, and in the long run, it's better to pick your species on the location. Right tree, right place. FPL has a guiding document to put out. They can be very restrictive, but we like to recommend at least the principle of choosing your species based on where you're putting them. All right. So once you pick your species and your location, we like all the measures to be taken to ensure that tree survives and becomes well established. So with that, proper irrigation through the establishment period, and then supports. For all of these support examples, we recommend they be taken off, be left on no longer than a year. you leave them on longer, they don't really need them past a year. Certain extenuating circumstances, big storms, stuff like that, maybe. But if you leave them on longer than that, you bring in the possibilities for damage to that tree, especially when you forget about it. So some of the examples that we see, there's a myriad of different products out there for tree supports and things like that. But vertical tree stakes, guy wires, and leaning stakes are some of the most common ones. And each landscape contractor that you may deal with or that you are usually has their typicals that they go with. So for vertical tree stakes, we recommend at least 2. Doing 1 can work, but we see a lot of times that if the support isn't there, you have to tie it closer to the stake, and then there's always possibility for that tree to twist and just pull that stake out of the ground. Or damage the tree because it's tied too tightly. Again, guy wires, pretty common. A lot of times it's not actually wire. They'll use a strap to tie around it and with multiple purchase points. And for these type of supports, we like to see it resembles garden hose, polypropylene 3/4 inch tube to go over it to just protect that tree from scarring, wind swaying, anything like that. And then leaning stakes, you typically see those on larger trees, palm trees. A lot of times you'll see them go in with royals. And the tree is wrapped with a burlap sack, and then it has the support structures attached. And there's no actual hardware going into the tree to protect it. But again, as that tree grows, you want those to be removed so it doesn't choke the tree. All right, so long-term care. So within the village code that has come out, they're supporting the ANSI A300 standards with the guiding documents for all arborists. There's tons of different regulations in there. And the best recommendation that the village can give is that if you have concerns about a tree, you want to prune it or anything like that, to consult a landscape professional and arborist, and they'll be able to tell you the best way to proceed. All pruning should have a purpose, whether it be structural stability, wind resistance, if there's potential damaging that the tree can do to itself or personal property. These are things that they're goals that pruning can achieve, rather than just going up and trimming a tree because you think it needs to be trimmed. Picking what needs to be trimmed is very important. So with that, there's a few basic tenets. Developing a strong central leader, very important to structural stability of a tree. I have an example in here a little later on. You'll see it's an oak tree that was planted and it has 3 central leaders. What happens, 1, it's going to grow a lot slower, but 2, as it gets bigger, the weight on those 3 central branches as it comes out becomes so much that the support of that tree is lost, and eventually one of those may break off and just cause unnecessary stress on that tree. So from a very young age, it's important to properly prune, maintain, to ensure that these later problems, 10, 15, 25 years down the road, is not going to kill the tree or cause damage to your property. So part of the ways to do that, identify the lowest branch and what will become the permanent crown, and then preventing branches below that from getting more than twice the width of the trunk. And again, those just add to the structural stability of that tree. And then for any one pruning, to not eliminate more than 25% of that canopy, kind of a basic guideline. It's give or take, you could go over and it not have too much effect, but just kind of a general principle to not remove more than 25% of that canopy at one time. And that just speaks towards the biology of a tree when you think about the energy production. If you're removing all the foliage off of a tree, it's going to severely impact the productivity of that tree in the coming years and its growth rate and its ability to stay structurally sound through a storm or anything like that. And then general safety regulations, using the right tools from the right location, not using a dull saw on a rickety ladder is going to help you and it's going to help the tree. You won't cause unnecessary damage to that tree. All right, so this helps just identify a few of the branches that you want to prune, not consulting an arborist. So crossing branches, water spouts, hanging branches, closely spaced branches, broken limbs, branch stubs, and sucker growth are all pretty common branches that you want to remove just for the general health of that tree. Again, not pruning more than you need to, general rule of 25%, but these branches are really the most common ones to damage the health of the tree or impact its structure. And then Obviously, a broken branch has the possibility of falling. And then something else to consider that some people don't think of is pruning non-self-cleaning palm trees. So when you think of a sable palm, those branches you need to trim off when they die. Otherwise, you'll see the ones that have never been touched out along the groves. They got the dead branches all the way down. A lot of the times you're used to seeing the hurricane cuts where there's just 3 or 4 little fronds coming up from the top of the tree. It's really not good for the tree. Understand certain storm events, you want to trim off as much as you can. But in that instance, it's really not good for the health of the tree, and over a lasting period, that trunk you'll actually see will narrow to the tip to an eventual demise of that tree. So our rule typically is 9 to 3. So when you think of a clock, you don't want to breach that horizontal plane of the top of the crown of the tree. So as long as you have some fronds still touching that horizontal line, generally you're okay. But another rule of thumb is that if there's still green on the branch, it's still productive for that tree, so there's not really a need to get rid of it yet. And then this is that tree I was telling you about that's actually in the village on a commercial property where it's the oak tree that was planted. It shouldn't have been planted. It wasn't Florida #1 when it was planted, and that is a requirement within the village to be Florida #1, which is one of the requirements to be Florida #1 is a strong central leader. And generally we see that up to about chest height. And so over the years, this tree will have serious structural issues because of its 3 central leaders. Something else that most people don't commonly think of is sterilizing your equipment. This generally only applies to large jobs to where there's some pathogen within some of the trees on site. Again, consulting an arborist, they're going to know, they'll be able to see for the most part if a tree is suffering from one of these things. And the problem is that if there's a large pruning job and they're going around tree to tree to tree cutting with the same tools, if one of those trees is contaminated or has some sort of pathogen or fungi that can be transferred to another tree, it will be if that saw cuts live tissue to live tissue. And so that's just something to be aware of for most property owners who do use a landscape consultant. Their consultant's going to know that. Using an arborist, having them oversee work, they'll be able to spot these areas, and you won't have that issue of spreading these different infections. All right, so one of the most important things that we can stress is making the right cut. So a lot of times you'll see property owners or landscape consultants go out and they may cut the right branch, but they don't do it the right way, and it has a catastrophic result for that tree. So there's a few different types of cuts: reduction cuts, removal or collar cuts, and heading cuts. So what we recommend, if you're removing a branch entirely, first step is to remove most of the mass of that branch before you cut it off at the tree. And you always want to cut that branch off above the collar next to the tree. There's a lot of natural chemicals in those collars, and at that point it is the smallest area. If you cut it flush to the tree, you're creating the biggest possible wound on that tree to where it has to heal. So again, first removing the main body of that branch. You're cutting it up a little ways, maybe going from the bottom a third of the way through the branch and then through the top the rest of the way. You're reducing all that weight from that branch so that once you remove it, it isn't going to cause splitting when that branch wants to come down off the tree. It won't split the branch, it won't split the trunk. You're not going to cause any excess damage. And then once you remove most of that mass, you can go through and make a nice clean cut, not have to worry about a big branch coming down on you or anything around you. And something else, I'll go back here for a second. So reduction cuts, something else. If you have a branch coming off of a large tree, say it's in a windstorm, it's hitting your house or hitting a fence or something like that, you want to head that branch off so it stops damaging whatever it's damaging or the potential for it to damage in the future. Rather than doing strictly a heading cut to where you just cut that branch off where you think is right, if you bring it back to the best lateral branch on that, you're going to redirect that growth so that there is less potential for further trimming in the future. So rather than just coming off and trimming it right there, you can bring it back to a lateral branch and somewhat redirect the growth on that. It's something that we see a lot. And again, consulting a landscape professional or an arborist, it's very important. They'll be able to tell you where to cut or direct their own people on where to cut. All right, so things to avoid, as I said, flush cuts. It's really the worst way you could cut off a branch. It creates the biggest wound. And then just creates ample opportunity for a variety of different pests and just decreases the bounce back and the healing process for that tree. Rob mentioned earlier in the first meeting, a lot of times they get called out for bees being in trees, and it's usually because of this, because when people cut off a branch, it creates that big spot, and that's the prime opportunity for rot or insects to eat away at that tree and create a big hole, which is a perfect place for bees to congregate. All right, something else that we see all the time, hat racking or tree topping. Rob brought up the example earlier of a shopping center in Royal Palm Beach where they had a whole bunch of gumbo limbos out front of their property, and they came across, cut them all off the top, and left their branches about 3 foot tall. Happened about 5 or 6 months ago now, and those trees have started to grow back. Their branches coming back now are about 6 foot tall, real long, spindly, not supported, and just not providing the productivity that that tree needs to properly grow. So these are some pretty extreme examples, but you'll see a lot of times when you cut off a branch straight away, get rid of all the foliage, it's going to send out shoots, it'll grow back, but it's going to grow back in a completely different way than what it was naturally going to do. And you're going to have a lot of competing branches coming up, and it's just, it won't ever look the same.
Is any specific areas people can do that type of job?
Are there areas that is allowed?
Yeah. Because I see a lot of people that know areas where they have trees similar like that.
No, that's the exact reason that we're creating this kind of code, to steer people away from that. The arborist in the back will tell you that it's a very.
I see a lot of places just trees like that in Royal Palm. So I thought they have some different license to do that type of job.
Well, we're trying to educate as many people as we can, but come June 20th, we're going to continue to write those people up and come in and coach them into compliance.
There's certain species that are common that you see a type of trim like that, but for a majority of the species that are in the village, it's not what we want to see. It's particularly some of the examples that we've talked about. So gumbo limbo oak tree, you'd never want to do that to. It's not the proper way to trim those trees. And a lot of times it's property owners. So in that development that we're talking about, that was the property management, the property owner coming through because of complaints from their tenants that they couldn't see the signs. People couldn't see their signage from the road. So the obvious solution, well, we'll trim the trees. What harm is that going to cause? And that's exactly the problem. Protecting the canopies of the tree. We understand there's signage concerns with a lot of these properties, but going and just clear cutting your trees is not the solution. And there is penalties for it.
Also, some of the information in your packets, make sure you take that with you and look that over, because you'll see the techniques that are described here and the reasoning, for that. When those trees are cut like that, those growth branches that come off never incorporate with the trunk. They're grown right from the bark, and they don't have the same structure as a leader for the tree. So it's just a matter of time before that part becomes damaged, causing more decay and more damage to that tree, and ultimately damage to your property.
So another type of trim job that we see are something we like to call lion tailing. So that's where they're coming in and trimming off all the interior foliage in that tree to where you just have a clump on the end. Again, greatly reduces the structure of the tree. Again, just from wind resistance alone, you're putting a great big parachute on the end of that tree, and I mean, it also kind of looks funny. But again, thinking of productivity, removing more than 25% of that canopy, you're greatly impacting that tree's growth and its structure, the way it grows. You have your base branches, and there's nothing in there. There's no interior to that tree. You just have the tips. All right, so finally, as I said, for removing your structural supports is something we see all the time. Landscape contractors will come in, they do a good job, they plant the tree, they put up the supports, and then it just gets left, it gets forgot about. And those supports stay on for years, and eventually it's going to create these, it's going to girdle the tree, it's going to create these marks, it's going to impact its growth, and it's going to cause you problems down the road. And then this middle picture is an example, like I said, the tubing used around those those supports when it's planted to prevent scarring. even that over a few years is going to cause damage if it's left on too long. So, if you have any questions on any of that, happy to answer.
There's a lot more to this than we realize, isn't there?
And there's even more information than that. This is a very basic overview of some of the things that we've seen that we want to address. We want to get the information out there for residential and commercial property owners, just to know offhand. If I see that being done, I can address it. We won't have a code compliance issue. Our goal is compliance. It's not to be punitive. We don't want to go out and hand people citations. We just want the village to look better and our trees to be healthier.
All right, if no more questions, then we'll adjourn the meeting, and thank you. Yes, sir.
I think this is extremely important. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I have been spending between $30,000 to $50,000 a year in just improving my landscaping throughout both the commercial and residential properties. So it is expensive, but in my opinion, it's worth the investment. So I'm willing to put in that kind of money. I know I have, in each of the commercial properties, I have over $1 million in landscaping over the last 30, 40 years. But yeah, all of this is well worth it. So I thank you for your interest in educating the public.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out as well, everybody. Guys, have a great evening.
You were supposed to bring them.